After the German army steamrolled into Poland, Scandinavia, most of Western Europe, and the Balkans, Adolf Hitler, leader of Nazi Germany, set his eyes on the east, and on June the 22nd of 1941, with 3.5 million troops, Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union without a declaration of war. This invasion was known as Operation Barbarossa, and it was done to begin a crusade against the so-called Judeo-Bolshevism of the Soviet Union. As in the propagandist view of the Nazis, they saw the communism of the Soviet Union as being the result of Jewish influence. The Red Army wasn't capable of stopping the German advance after the purges that Joseph Stalin had committed on his officer corps, which paralyzed the Red Army for the next few months. Additionally, throughout the war, several groups that were either sympathetic to the Nazis and or hated the Soviet Union or the Russians due to previous histories of oppression, war, and ideological reasons, also aided the Germans. For example, Finland, that joined Germany in its war in order to take back areas taken by the Soviet Union in the Winter War. And you had the Ukrainian Organization for Nationalists, with members such as Stepan Bandera, who aided the Nazis in their war efforts against the Soviet Union. This gave the German army the opportunity to invade huge parts of Eastern Europe and begin their ethnic cleansing of the land that they deemed as Lebensraum, or living space. The Slavs, who were seen as undesirables, were massacred or enslaved by the Reich, working them to death in work camps or on the fields of the areas that the Germans had taken over. Men and women who resisted the Nazi occupation went to the forest and joined various partisan movements. Their job was to sabotage infrastructure and hunt down Nazi collaborators. This resistance was punished severely though, such as the Koryokivka massacre, where several thousands of people were killed and the village of Koryokivka was burnt down by the Germans due to suspicions of having hosted partisans. And similar happened during the Chaiten massacre of 1943 as retaliation of a German patrol that got attacked by Soviet partisans. These weren't unusual happenings, as the German army and Nazi SS groups, such as the infamous Fürlewanger Brigade, which consisted of hardened criminals, such as rapists and the like, routinely committed massacres and other atrocities against the civilian population of the Soviet Union, resulting in deaths of several millions and over 5,000 villages that were completely or partially destroyed in Belarus alone, many more in other parts of the Soviet Union. On December 7th, 1941, the Japanese Empire declared war on the United States by bombing Pearl Harbor and proceeding to occupy the Philippines and most of Pacific Asia. Nazi Germany joined in and also declared war on the United States, and thus the Americans began to supply the Soviet Union with guns, trucks, food and ammunition, as they now had a common enemy. After the German defeat in Moscow and Stalingrad, the Red Army, now reorganized, goes on the offensive. The Red Army, fueled with rage, plunged their dagger into Eastern Europe, getting closer to Germany and spreading their spheres of influence. The Poles, who were afraid of both Soviet occupation and resented the foreign German rule in Poland, tried to liberate themselves during the Warsaw Uprising, in which the Red Army watched from the other side of the Vistula River as the uprising got decimated by the SS troops, destroying 90% of the city. After the uprising, the Red Army went on to conquer Warsaw and occupy Poland. As they moved further westward, the Red Army discovered the true horrors of fascism, such as but not limited to Auschwitz, a concentration camp where 1.5 million Jews and the undesirables were murdered in a systematic way and were experimented on by doctors such as Josef Mengele, also known as the Angel of Death, who fled to Argentina after the war. The Red Army also found huge loads of luggage, gold, jewels and glasses, which the Germans had confiscated from their victims and had planned to send back to Germany. Even when the Red Army liberated Auschwitz, many of these people, these victims of the Nazis' brutality in the camps, still died of malnutrition after the liberation of the camps. On February the 4th, 1945, Winston Churchill, Joseph Stalin and Franklin Delano Roosevelt met in Yalta. During the conference, they agreed to divide Germany into occupation zones controlled by the Allied powers, and plans were made for the establishment of democratic governments in liberated European countries. But Stalin had other plans and decided to subjugate the eastern countries and bring them under the rule of Moscow. On April the 16th, 1945, the Red Army reached the gates of Berlin, fighting hard on every street, in every house, and in every building, until the Soviet flag was proudly hoisted on top of the Reichstag, the German parliament. Hitler realized that he had lost the war and committed suicide with his wife, Eva Braun. Though the guns went silent, the soldiers never forgave the Germans of the rape, the executions, the hangings, and the looting that occurred in Operation Barbarossa. Thus, they unleashed their wrath on the German civilian population, creating a hostile environment for the people of Berlin, especially for the German women who were raped in the masses by Red Army troops. This event would be known as the Rape of Berlin. On November the 20th, 1945, to October the 1st, 1946, the Nuremberg trials are held by the Allies. This was the first time that a trial was held for the ones responsible for the millions of deaths that have occurred during World War II and in the Holocaust. The systematic attempt at eradicating those that the Nazis deemed as being racially inferior. During the trial, they sentenced key Nazi figures such as Hermann Göring, Joachim von Ribbentrop, and Alfred Jodl to death, or some of them were sentenced to life imprisonment, like Rudolf Hess. But not everyone was tried for their crimes, such as the 118 German scientists who were captured by the Americans during Operation Paperclip. They also succeeded by capturing Werner von Braun, who designed the V-1 and V-2 rockets used to bomb London. He was given immunity by the Americans and would later work at NASA during the upcoming Cold War. On June 24th, 1945, on the Red Square, the Soviet Union proudly celebrated their victory over Nazi Germany, and as like in the days of the Roman Empire of old, soldiers threw the flag of the defeated at the feet of the vanquished. But their memories would never fade, as the soldiers would still remember the time when the German soldiers crossed the border of their country. These memories, like scars from wounds, would stay in their heads for the rest of their lives, like whispers, until the silence of death took them.